The Indiana Pacers, they made the conference finals last season. Was it real? Was it fake? Are they getting overvalued? Do we think they're good? Do we think they're bad? Let's care about the fantasy values. Michael Bolton, that's all he focuses on.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I cannot wait tomorrow to sit down, get the pies out of the oven, get the beers flowing, and watch Katy Perry. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at LockedOnFantasyBasketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms, so a thumb, 2 thumbs, no, just one, actually, just double bang it as well. And leave your comments down below. Did the Lakers show earlier today. Just rounding these off, going to have some guests on next week. Mock drafts, late round flyers, updated sleepers and bust lists. ESPN has changed their rankings for points and categories. I'm going to give it a few days and wait to see if there's any movement on the Yahoo side of things before we put out new videos. Otherwise, I might just do a ESPN one on its own. We'll find out. I don't know. We'll see where we go with that. Anyway, we are here to talk fantasy basketball. We are here to talk about the Indiana Pacers quickly. Again, check your emails if you put in an application for the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. There are still some going out as I sift through every single league and find out who is in and who is out and who's paid and who hasn't, and then replace the ones who have been given enough time and haven't paid, blah, blah, blah. So there'll be invites going out every day as we try and get things ready for the drafts, a lot of them starting next week. If you aren't aware of what a slow draft is, I know that there are going to be people that complain, oh my God, what time is it? That is so early. How can I do a draft? Each pick is 7 hours. You don't have to take 7 hours, but you have up to 7 hours. In fact, I don't want you to take 7 hours. Get a pick done in half an hour, get a pick done in 1 hour. But you have 7 hours. So if the draft starts on Tuesday and you're asleep in the morning, that's okay, because by the time it gets back to your pick, you'll be awake. And it will roll through that way. And don't get annoyed at others who are taking forever, although if someone's doing it deliberately, that can be frustrating. Whatever. Slow draft. Many of you have done them before. Some of you haven't. It is a novel experience. Again, for some, it will be something you've never done. And I hope that it all goes smoothly. But don't panic and think, oh, I need to get out of this. I can't do it at this time. Because the picks last a long time. Pacers. I worry a little bit about this squad, that the fact that they made it to the conference finals, they might be hawksing it, they might be blazering it, and thinking that they're better than they are. Getting through teams with injuries. Obviously, the Knicks were banged up. The Bucks were banged up. They did well during the season. The Pacers were banged up as well. They did well during the season, and they made moves to get a Pascal Siakam. But some of the stuff they did or didn't do in the offseasons, maybe a little bit of a fear of sniffing their own farts too much. They re-signed Pascal Siakam. They signed no one else in free agency. They gave, some may say, too much money too early to Andrew Nembhard. Some would also definitely say, everybody would say this, they gave too much money to Obi Toppin. So we'll see where they go. But overall, the squad it's relatively similar in terms of what we're talking about from last season. Let's take a look at the projected starting 5. Don't really see much argument here. It is going to be Tyrese Haliburton. Which one of his voices he used, I don't know, but he's going to be there. Andy Nembhard is going to be there at the shooting guard, I'm fairly certain. They paid him a big amount of money. They seem to think that he had developed into a pseudo-star. I don't really believe that at all. And again, we'll talk about him more in depth later. But we saw Nembhard start for Haliburton many, many times, and he was bad. Well, not bad. He was below mid. But in the playoffs, he had some big games. And I don't know which one is real. At small forward, I think it's going to be Aaron Nesmith unless Jarris Walker comes from the absolute clouds, or they decide Ben Mathurin and Nembhard start at the 2-3 together. But I'm pretty sure Nesmith is going to be the guy. Pascal Siakam, of course, is at the 4, and Miles Turner will definitely be the starting center on this team again. The only one that maybe marginally is debatable is Nesmith. I don't think Nembhard is, but maybe Nesmith. There's a little debate with him for this season. Let's talk about guys who may or may not be undervalued guys on this squad from a fantasy perspective. And there are a couple. It really is going to depend on where your draft is and what rankings you're looking at and the type of format that you're playing in. But this guy, no matter what, I think, Miles Turner will always appear on an overrated, sleeper, underrated, bust, however you want to frame it. I know I mix those two up, but whatever it is, he is going to be there because there are large differences in A, how people value him for the different format types, or B, how much in a category league people overvalue the potential of blocks. So at the moment, I actually think if you're drafting on ESPN where Miles Turner has an ADP of 71, that is really, really good value. Turner, a guy that's flirted with alleged second-round value in the past. It wasn't, but he flirted with it. He's 29. He's 6'11". He played only 27 minutes a game last season. The 23 usage is high as well. I think that might come down. But only 27 minutes. He is a free agent at the end of this season, and there's no way that they're able to extend him. And given the money that they've splashed around on other players this offseason, could that? I know we've done it a million times about the Miles Turner trade, but expiring contract, only 27 minutes a night, no way to extend. Do they? I mean, they probably don't. But what if they're not as good as they think they are? What if they're in the 500 zone, below 500 in February? They're like, Turner's 29. We're not actually playing him that much. What if? Don't think it'll happen. Turner averaged 17 and 7 with 1.5 threes and 2 blocks on 52 and 77. They're really, really strong numbers. Now, it is below average scoring. He doesn't get any assists or steals, obviously, but you've got to balance all of that stuff. But in a category league, when he sits at number 71, like, you're very happy with that number. I also think there is maybe, and I do think Andrew Nembhard's slightly overrated. I think, though, that given some of these rankings, there is something there. In category leagues, on ESPN, he's ranked at 192, and on points leagues at ESPN, he is ranked at 187. I don't think that Nembhard is much more than a last-round pick. I don't think he's more than that. But over the last, say, week or two, I've been diving into a little bit more stuff, and I did make some tweaks to some of his projections. Now, on Yahoo, I think he's either about right or too early. He's ranked 122 on Yahoo, but ESPN's got him at 192 on category leagues. That, to me, suggests, again, that's a 16-team league, maybe draft, maybe not. And I don't think that that's real either. I think he's better than that. Nembhard did have those starts last season for the Pacers when Haliburton was out, and we all know that it was TJ McCollum. TJ McCollum? That's not the right person. That's an amalgamation. It's TJ McConnell, Timothy John. We all know that it was McConnell that was putting up the numbers and not old mate Andy. But in the playoffs, we got to see a bit of an explosion from Andy when Tyrese was dealing with another injury, and it really helped. You can see on the screen Nembhard's season-long numbers, but if I have a look at what he did when he was a starter, he started 47 games last season. He played 28 minutes. He had 10 points, 2 rebounds, and 4.3 assists. He shot 50 and 36 from the field. He averaged under a steal a game with absolutely no blocks at all. So it's not actually that different to those season total numbers. Like, he averaged 9.2 points in 25 minutes, and as a starter, he averaged 10 points with 2 rebounds and 4 assists. It's like exactly the same numbers. I think, though, that the 28 minutes he averaged as a starter last season will go to 31 or 32 maybe, although Richard Carlisle does like to keep some of those minutes down. Again, we circle this back to the value of him. Like, if I'm in round 11 and having a look at Nembhard, with your last picks, you want flyers, but you don't have to do it for every pick. And if you want more of a stable, interesting player whose role is okay, and maybe it is actually a breakout, and I'm not convinced of it, but maybe it is a breakout for Nemby, then there's something a little bit more interesting to take a look at. But all I want to really highlight here for him is the fact that when we're talking about his numbers and the rankings, the deeper leagues would maybe avoid him. Like, in his 17 playoff games, he played 33 minutes. He averaged 15 points with 5.5 assists, no steals or blocks, but I want you to very much remember this part of it. He shot 48% on threes and 56% overall. And that is just not happening. And he didn't take he hit only 1.7 threes. He didn't take volume threes. He just had, it was 17 games, absolutely. He had a ridiculously strong stretch of shooting and 60% on twos as well that boosted his numbers and made him look better. The 5.5 assists, really strong. We love that. But don't get over the top. This is me telling you about someone who's undervalued and all the way I'm just shitting on him. But no, it's not, don't get too far on it. And I think the ESPN ranks for both categories and points leagues has probably gone too far in the wrong direction. But just be cautious with it. We're going to talk overvalued busts types in a sec. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The start of the NFL season is here, and when the season starts off, like it has right now, you can get a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You're sitting there, you're down, you're on your couch, you got your drinks, you're watching the game, and you get a hunch, you get a tingle. You get a Peter tingle come all over you. Oh, maybe not, but you get something. You get a feeling of, oh, maybe this is going to happen. So you open the app, you can have a look at the different bets on the screen, and then you've got the stats there. You've got the play-by-play information. So you've got everything that you need to take a look at all the different things, all on the same page where you place your bets, of course, on FanDuel. And if you are a new customer and you're signing up right now, the first $5 bet that you place will garner you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is a guarantee. $200 bonus bets guaranteed. First $5 bet, easy. So go to FanDuel.com right now to get started. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. Might mix up that warning tag at the end there. Got some other ones we'll chuck in there. We'll see how we go. All right, that was the overvalued guys. What about the undervalued players? Sorry, other way around. That was undervalued. Now let's look at overvalued. Who is in a position where rankings sites or host provider sites have guys too high? And this, a little shocked because this is the clear media bias team, the big market Indianapolis. Just always just going ham on these guys. Like, it's a common problem where Indiana gets oversaturation in terms of market and coverage. But there are a lot of overvalued guys, I think, in fantasy on this Indiana Pacers team. And we'll start with a guy that I am putting under the lens a little bit later. So we'll talk more about Tyrese Haliburton. But I actually think that if you're in a points league draft, the Yahoo ranks, which of course are trying to be everything to everyone and solving the problem or serving the audience in no way whatsoever, these are wrong. His ADP is 7, and his rank, Tyrese Haliburton on Yahoo, is 5. Which, if you're in a category league, go for it. Not a problem whatsoever. If you want to take Haliburton at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, do it. Do it. You can do it. In a Yahoo points league, you should not be doing it. I'm going to talk more about Haliburton later, but he averaged 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 11 assists with 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks on 48 and 86. That is a very clear first-round type fantasy player. He's a very clear, really good player who was a top 5 MVP candidate for the first half of last season. And then, of course, we know that the NBA, in their infinite wisdom in handling a perceived problem of load management, in the infinite wisdom of the handling, has been a long-term thing that they've been awesome at, is handling hamstring injuries. Tyrese Haliburton was the latest one to be handled absolutely perfectly, and things went awry. Last season, in fantasy points leagues, Haliburton was 16th. That is all I need to tell you about why he is overvalued. He was 16th last season for for points leagues. So if you're looking at him ranked at 5th, well, it's not going to work, is it? It's not going to be good. I just talked about Miles Turner, saying that maybe there was a little bit of underrating for him. Well, in category leagues, I fear maybe we're the other way around. Because on ESPN, he's ranked at 35th, which, again, some people will really enjoy that idea because they're going to really want to dig those blocks in and get them, but I think there's downside risk. Like I discussed earlier, the minutes aren't particularly strong. He's a very, not singular category player, but he's not a super strong category guy right across the board. His right spot to me is in the 50s, not at 35, and ESPN's category ranking has him 35. And then we run into the same problem on Yahoo where the ranking of 44 or the ranking of 41 for Turner and an ADP of 44 tries to do both. It's probably a little early on category, but it's okay. But it's definitely way too early for Miles Turner in a points league. So be aware how your format dictates it. Be aware of those different situations. He only arrived halfway through the season last year, but Pascal Siakam is someone who, again, always seems to fall victim to some of the problems of the way that systems are set up. And ignore that points league rank because he is not ranked 363rd. I don't know how that information is there. That is wrong. But he is dealing with an ADP on ESPN, Pascal Siakam, an ADP of 27, which, if you are in a points league, is actually more within reason. I won't say that it's like a perfect spot and it's one of those ones where you absolutely have to do it and you have to take Pascal Siakam there. But in a category league, that is just not going to be very fun. His rank, actually, Siakam on category leagues on ESPN 73, And that's actually about bang on, to be honest. Yahoo's got him ranked at 54. It's maybe a little early with an ADP of 52. But ESPN, like category leagues or points leagues, I think he's probably around 30-ish. Probably around that area. And that rank of where it is 21 is just... that ADP of 27 for category leagues doesn't work. For points leagues, it's okay. It's sort of there. But an ADP of 27 for Siakam is not good. Siakam, what's going on with this graphic? That is an incorrect number. But anyway, 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. He's a bad free throw guy with decent field goals and gets no steals and no blocks. And when he joined Indiana last season, we saw his assist numbers drop pretty significantly. And guess what? He's going to be in Indiana all season. So I will even have a level of doubt of Pascal maintaining the same level of production that he did last season. The last guy I've got on this overrated list, and not that many of you would be considering drafting him, I don't think, but Aaron Nesmith is weirdly high on Yahoo, and I don't really know why. He's got an ADP of 128, which is very clearly influenced by the ranking, which sits at 114. And 114 is a 12-team league starting caliber player. And Aaron Nesmith is not that. Like, he literally might not even start. I think he will, but he might not. He played 28 minutes a game and averaged 12 points with 2 threes. He's very much below average in rebounds and assists. He's a good defender, but steals and blocks are not super, super strong, and then percentages are fine. Like, he's one of the most boring mid-ass players that's going to sit there at the back end of your draft with zero upside, who's going to get frothed up because he has low turnovers, which, again, I can get low turnovers by getting somebody like Derrick Rose, who just retired. And that is just not a player that you want as a starter in your 12-team format. I just don't think that makes really any sense in terms of picking someone at that position. That doesn't jive with me in that sort of respect at all. Let's go and get into the next part where we're going to talk breakout candidates. Are they going to break out? Maybe. I don't know. But what we're looking at with these guys is who has an opportunity to do more than maybe some people think. And maybe this is an opportunity for Andy Nembhard, a 30-plus minute a night role maybe. Playoff success, new contract, he steps up into something larger. The other two guys are not players that we expect to be starting. They're not players that you'd expect to be having these big numbers immediately. But I said that I don't know whether Aaron Nesmith's going to be a starter. But what about the guy they picked number 7 last season, Jarris Walker, who for some reason they've seen and they've gone, all right, we drafted a power forward at pick number 7. Let's trade for a power forward. Sorry, they picked him at number 7 last year as a power forward, and they went, all right, let's trade for a power forward. No, not that one, the other one, Obi Toppin. And then Obi Toppin sucked, so let's trade for another one in Pascal Siakam. Cool. And then let's re-sign both of those players in the offseason so that Jarris Walker's a third-string power forward. Now, that is not what you want in year 2 for your 7th pick. So they are trying to make him into a 3. And, sorry to tell you guys, he's not. He's not a 3. They're trying to make him one. And he has flashes at times. I think that he wasn't someone I was super high on as a prospect anyway. Like, I was probably below consensus on him. I worried about the shooting. I worried about, was he too undersized to be a center, which is where I thought he needed to play. Now they're going the other direction and try and play him at the 3. But maybe my analysis of what I saw from him summer league and last season, that he turns that around and he is great, and he takes that job away from Nesmith and he's in the starting group. Pesky perimeter defender who starts shooting well and generating defensive stats and handles the ball as well. Maybe. Probably not, but maybe. He's at least in that zone of year 2, maybe an open position, high draft capital investment. He averaged 3 points a game last year with 2 rebounds and half a steal and played 10 minutes a night, was just barely there. So I'm not going to get too excited about it. The other one I'm not going to get too excited about, but Isaiah Jackson. Now, 2 years ago, the expectation was on this stupid team that they signed Jalen Smith to be their starting power forward and that Isaiah Jackson could be their backup center, and every rumor in the world was telling us that maybe they're moving on from Miles Turner. I went, all right, if that happens and they're starting Isaiah Jackson, then he is going to dominate for fantasy. He'll not dominate, but he'll put up good numbers. So I was like, if you want to get him around the 90 to 100 mark, even if he's playing 20 minutes a night as a backup, you're not going to lose a huge amount. I don't mind that. And it was very, very clearly wrong. Because not only was Miles Turner not traded, but Jackson became the third-string center because guess what? The guy they had at power forward, Jalen Smith, sucked as a power forward. So they went to Toppin, and then they went to Siakam, and they drafted Jarris Walker. Siakam's good, obviously. He fills the need. But Smith is gone. And Smith left because he thought he had an opportunity to start in Chicago, and he didn't think he had that opportunity in Indiana. Yes, they acquired James Wiseman, lol. I don't think that Wiseman's going to be taking minutes away from Jackson. But what we're talking about here is Miles Turner, who's had injury problems in the past. Maybe there's the contract situation. I don't know. But this is it. If he plays 27 minutes a night, Turner, that means 21 available center minutes. And some of them will go to Obi. Some of them will go to, as I said that, I realized as I said Obi before my dog Obi burst down the door. Some of them will go to Siakam. But Jackson played 13 minutes a night last year. 6.5 and 4 with 1 block and 67 and 72. Let's take 13 and make it 20. Just from those numbers. All right, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 1.5 blocks on 67 and 72. And honestly, it's usable in 12s. I wouldn't draft him in 12s unless I'm in a stashable situation. Weekly leagues, games, caps, rotos. Because if something happens to Turner, this guy would potentially be top 70-ish value. He might only play 25. And they go with Wiseman, lol. Or they go with Siakam or Toppin in more of those minutes. But there is the chance here. I'm not expecting it at all. But the clearing of Jalen Smith, of old sticks out of there, does enable Isaiah Jackson to have at least an opportunity to do something a little more. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports platform, daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is you go more or less, and you pick up between 2 to 6 individual player projections, and bang, off you go. PrizePicks is also the only real money daily fantasy platform that's got an injury insurance policy. So if your player is hurt in the first half and does not return in the second half, your lineups, they're still alive. How good's that? It doesn't just kill it because someone's out and you have to send a begging tweet, void it please. You don't have to do that on PrizePicks because if they don't come back, it's done. It's over. They get, or that's not done. Actually, you're still alive, but that guy's out of there. So go in and check all the different types of stats and sports that are available on PrizePicks. Hopefully they are still running out the old disc golf. But what I do know is for September, they're running the Caleb Williams special. So every passing yard, or if Caleb Williams gets 1 passing yard, you get 1 win. All in September. Easy to do. So download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA and get $50 instantly when you play $5. The code is LOCKEDONNBA on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, so we looked at the breakouts now. Let's take a look at where maybe we've got some risks on the old rotation, what can happen. And because it is Richard Carlisle, there are many different things that could happen that could annoy us. That is just how he works. And one of those things we just talked about is, what do they do with Jarris Walker? Because there is really no minutes for him at power forward. So do they convert him full-time to small forward? Does he get the chance to compete with old mate Neesmith at small forward? But, of course, they could also run Mathurin there. They could also run Ben Shepherd, who played playoff minutes too. And speaking of Mathurin, he's back. I'm guessing he had a shoulder injury last season. And Mathurin was one of those guys that last season fit into that thing of, and you've heard me talk about it before, the player that I don't particularly like as a player. The player that I think gets overrated significantly. And this guy was getting overrated as a rookie. Man, he's better than Paolo. He's better than all these guys. He's going to be so great. Give him Rookie of the Year. And of course, he wasn't, and he's never going to be that. But then last season, there were some positive signs. Again, not to say that I like him as a player, because he was a very empty player. But what I did like from him last season is getting free throws and free throw attempts late in drafts. They basically said, Buddy Hield, you are coming off the bench and we are trading you. And that is literally what happened. And then Mathurin started and he was terrible. 14 points with 4 rebounds, bad defensive numbers, inefficient. His actual usage and free throw attempt rate went down. He didn't hit threes. He's still only 22 though, but he played 26 minutes with 23 usage. And now he has been usurped by not only Andy Nembhard, but I would say maybe even by Ben Shepherd. But what if Mathurin comes in year 3, flexes his muscles, drops some poutine on the coach's desk and says, unless you play me, you got to eat this. And they'll go, oh, we must play you then. Nah, jokes. I love poutine. But what if he actually looks good? I doubt it. But he could. And that would throw everything into the mix. Then maybe he plays with Nembhard. And then Walker and Neesmith don't have those chances. And Shepherd disappears into nothing. And Nembhard plays more backup point guard and limiting TJ McConnell. There's so many different factors that are all... Or maybe they just get rid of this guy. I don't think they will. But he sort of feels somewhat superfluous given the way that other players have played on this team. I'm going to talk injuries in a second, but Haliburton's leg is a massive concern, and obviously that changes everything. So maybe if you are in a deeper format or a stashable type situation, that you just grab Tim John McConnell, old TJ, Macca, you put him on your bench because 8 assists a game and 2 steals from TJ, if Haliburton's out, is distinctly possible, and the man gets you like 57% shooting somehow as a point guard. The other risk is the backup center. What if they do just decide to rotate through Jackson and Wiseman? Again, laughable. What if they do it? What if Wiseman becomes good? Again, laughable, but maybe. And then something happens with Turner, injured, traded, whatever. And then someone else gets that opportunity that may have been going towards old mate Isaiah, but maybe not headed that way in the end. All right, let's put Tyrese Haliburton under the lens, because it was a weird, wonderful, great, and annoying season all at once. And I say all of those things because Haliburton was the guy that most people playing fantasy had pushed up to say, you are in the mix for a top 5 pick. And at the start of the season, that was absolutely 100% bang on. That is the value that he provided. We saw it. He averaged 20 points, 11 assists. He averaged like almost a block and over a steal. He shot unbelievably. He was awesome. He was cranking. He was the second best offensive player in the game to begin the season. This team was playing fast pace. They went all the way through that in-season tournament into the final. They were tearing apart good teams through ridiculously fast offense, and this guy was orchestrating all of it. And then he pinged his hammy. And that was basically it. Not that he was bad, but he sort of was. And then we got the nonsense of the 65 game rule where he'd come in and it only counts as a game towards 65 games if you played 20 minutes. So he'd come in and play 20 minutes in 1 second and he wouldn't close games. He lost all of his bursts. It was like a hamstring strain, which honestly was like had to be at least a 3-week injury, right? At least. Came back within a week, re-injured again in the playoffs. And then we got into the Olympics and then he had to have an MRI and an non-specified leg injury. I don't know what it takes for NBA teams to understand how absolutely insane it is the way they treat hamstring injuries. But this is the biggest broken record scenario of all time. And it never fails to go wrong with the way they handle it. Never. And I don't get it. It makes no sense at all. Anyway, Haliburton, really efficient player. Unbelievable passer, unbelievable load, unbelievable creation. Usually he's a pretty good defensive guy with deflections. That dropped a little bit there with him, but he's a good shot blocker as a guard. The problem is that injury killed him. He couldn't get any lift on his shots. He couldn't hit threes. He couldn't get to the rim as well as he had earlier in the season. And then they introduced an extra variable, and that was Pascal Siakam. And Siakam did have an impact on Haliburton, but I don't know how much that impact actually was just Siakam being there, or the fact that Haliburton was running on one leg after pinging his hammy in January and never being allowed to heal and get fully ready to go. And now I assume that he's ready to go, but this MRI/Olympic situation makes me go, is something still going on here? Like, what is actually going on with Haliburton? And we don't have an answer. But it's one of the more obvious situations that we saw from him is that he got hurt, he came back, and he sucked. It was just so straightforward. If you look at that graph on the bottom, that is his 3-point percentage per game. And you can see the blue dots in the middle of the games he missed. And then basically, from the games he missed, look at where the 3-point percentage goes. It just drops way off. And there was a couple of little spikes here, but overall, it did drop. And then it started to rise again at the end of the playoffs, and he got hurt again. The Darko level for him as well was a continued rise. He was looking good and good and good, and then sort of middle of the season, the hamstring hit, and his production flattened off, and it limited his rise, and he just didn't look like the player that he was. Everything changed. How much is hamstring? 70%? How much is Siakam? 30%? Or is it 80-20? Or is it 50-50? We'll find out. The headshot plot here on the y-axis, like a box creation, which is a way to sort of to look at usage, but also incorporate box score stats to tell us how much the player is actually creating for his team, whether it's for himself or for others. The other one is 3-point openness rating. I'll talk about my thoughts there. I've got Haliburton and Siakam on this graph, along with Darius Garland. We've got De'Aaron Fox, his former teammate, and Trae Young. And I put guys there for certain reasons. Fox, obviously, because of the connection playing with Haliburton, and Garland because of a fantasy statistical similarity, Trae Young because these guys might battle to lead the league in assists, and of course Siakam because he's his teammate. So what I wanted to look at with the box creation is Haliburton is obviously really high up on that list. And his 2024 box creation dropped a little bit from where it was the year before. It's not a stark difference. It's like 15.1 to 14.9. It's not a stark difference, but it's enough. We can see other guys like Trae Young's actual box creation went up last season because he did more passing with DeJounte there. Darius Garland's dropped a lot. De'Aaron Fox has actually dropped a little bit. And Pascal Siakam, when he was in Indiana for most of the season, you see how big his box creation, much lower than everyone else's to begin with, but it fell pretty decently. What was interesting to me is the three-point openness rating. That's a metric the Basketball Index has to tell you how open you were on your threes. And Haliburton started out with a plus 40% or above 40% three-point percentage. And then when he got hurt, it was down at I think he was shooting like 30, 32, 33 for periods of time. What I find interesting is that his openness rating fell away last season. He became less open. So while I am going to attribute some of the problems with Haliburton shooting with the injury and the lift on it, some of it may be that offenses or opposing defenses guarded him differently. I could also come out and tell you that maybe the fact that his openness rating dropped is because he didn't have the athleticism or the burst in his legs to actually get open because of the hamstring. The other thing that's interesting there is the look at Siakam and him playing alongside Haliburton. We saw his openness rating go up as well, even though it was only half a season. So that's good to see the way that Haliburton was still able to do that and create things and open things up for others, even though he himself was put in a more disadvantageous situation. And we'll see, was it injury-related? Was it opposing defenses? We'll get a better idea. But we've got a couple of data points there that at least give us something to chew on. In terms of fantasy similarities in the radar chart here, the most similar player in terms of shape of game is Darius Garland, followed by Jordan Poole, Emmanuel Quickley, and Chris Middleton. Middleton one is very weird. Now, obviously, you can see the blue line there as Haliburton, and the assist part is gigantic. The steals are well above everyone else, and he's a clear level ahead of these players. But it's the sort of guy who can have some big assist numbers. Steals can be in the middle of the pack and shoots his threes at a decent enough level. Just good free throw guy. All of that sort of sits around. Just an idea of where they sit in comparison to other players. That's the idea of looking at this stuff. That will now bring us to take a look at the injury concerns on this squad. And we've already went through the Haliburton stuff because big concern, clearly, and I'm not 100% sure that we're fully over it. Given the Olympic stuff and the MRI and the leg, it's all just recurrent. And then Mathurin missed most of last season with that shoulder issue. I expect that he's going to be okay, but that is a long 6-month injury type scenario. Their fantasy playoff schedule, their fantasy schedule in general, when we take a look at trying to go through this, they've got 49 quality games, which is sort of middle of the pack, towards the back end of that. They've got 14 back-to-backs, which is in the middle. They've got 15 maximum game weeks, which is high, and their playoffs is really weird. Well, it's not really weird, but it's loaded, because if you finish on March the 23rd, they go 3-4-4. That's pretty good. And then every week after that, it's 4 games. So for a March 30 finish, it's 4-4-4. A Yahoo default, it is 4-4-4. And an ESPN default, it is 4-4-4-4. So basically, the last 4 weeks of the season, they play 4 games. That is a lot of games backloaded, meaning also that you're going to have a little bit of a lighter schedule start of the season. You can take some of that information if you're playing something like a best ball contest, look at your dates and where it fits, but that is a very loaded schedule towards the back end of the season. Let's take a look at young players on this team, guys that are under the age of 23. Things we need to pay attention to. We've already looked at Isaiah Jackson. His Bazemore Dynasty rank is 150 because bro's still young, man. Like, I know it's year 4, man, for him. Like, he's still really young. Ben Mathurin, I don't know how this is the case, but Bazemore loved him enough to put him top 100. I think largely that's because it likes younger players who get usage and play decent minutes, which happened the first couple of seasons. I'm not sold on that. Jarris Walker is a top 125 guy. That's a lot of those based on youth and some skill set stuff that we haven't seen translated, but there's still potential there. And then we've got their rookie for this season, who I was surprised, as you're well aware, to see the dildo Johnny Furphy drop into round 2. This is not a particularly strong draft, and I think if it was a better draft, that Furphy probably wouldn't have even entered it. But from some of the guys that went ahead of him, it didn't make a ton of sense. He's 6'8", he's a pretty strong rebounder, he's a smart cutter, and he's a good 3-point shooter. where he fits on this squad, like, is he an absolute long shot? Like, Andy Nembhard was a second-round player. Like, Furphy is 20. Like, is he a long shot to maybe take some Neesmith minutes ahead of a Walker and a Mathurin or Shepherd? I think he's a better prospect than Ben Shepherd, honestly. He averaged 9 points only at Kansas last season with 1.3 dribbles. He shot 47 and 77 as his percentages. 18 usage in college. No high steal rate, which they're not great translations to science. But I still like something about him. Is it because he went to school down the road? No, because I didn't know that until after I decided to like him. But he is a player that's got some interesting skills, finishing skills, rebounding skills, hustle skills, shooting ability. The other guy who is under the age of 23 on this squad is Kendall Brown, who has played, I reckon, about 2 minutes combined over 2 years. He had some leg issues. He is still back there. I'm out on him. He's too slow. I don't think he can shoot. He's like pigeonholed to play the three exclusively. And yeah, I'm not certain that he's good. In fact, I'm pretty confident that he's not. If we look at guys with the risk-reward, the best case, worst case variance scenarios on this team, the guy that came out as the highest, because I try to do a weighting based on where they go in a draft, because the more risk variance you have at the top of a draft is more important than variance at pick 100. And it was Haliburton, which was interesting. Variance of about 14 category league spots and points leagues about 7.6. We already know that he's overrated in points league formats because of the way that some of the rankings get put out. But that's a large variance that gives me some level of pause, because part of his strength is in free throws and part of it is in steals, and they are two very highly variable categories year on year, game on game. And he also was a good shot blocker as a guard, and he's a low scorer, which is the most stable number. So the guys who score more with more stability, it's probably more valuable in that type of situation. Lastly, we're looking at the old guys, the old bastards, the guys who are over the age of 29, where maybe there is a slight chance of decline, and for some of them there definitely will be. But both Pascal Siakam and TJ McConnell, who were re-signed in the offseason, are over 30. Siakam did suffer some level of drop in points last season. He's had a really wild career change from a defense-only power forward to a guy that gets no defensive stats and is a high-usage player who can't really shoot threes, but like he's solid enough in points leagues and not as good in category leagues. But he is older, and now we see a full season with Haliburton, and I don't really know how it's going to all adjust. So again, I've already gone through the over and under values for him, but he's on that older side. Not going to be bad, but maybe some little drops there. And the other one is TJ, because TJ McConnell at the start of last season, we looked at their rotation and we said, I don't really know where TJ is going to play on this team. And basically at the start of the year, Rick Carlisle came out and said, yeah, we had to tell TJ, sorry, there's not a rotation spot here. And then everyone else sucked, and TJ was great and he was back in the rotation. They signed him to an insane contract extension, even though there's some non-guarantees on the end. He's 33. He's only 6'1". He played 18 minutes, but averaged 10, 2, and 5.5 with a steal on 56 and 79, which are insane, crazy numbers. And that is why if Haliburton goes down, I don't care about anything. He's a must-grab in every category league if Haliburton gets hurt. If we hear there's any limitations on Haliburton, I would draft TJ McConnell. If you're in a situation where you're maybe in a 14-team, I would draft him there anyway, because his ability to get 5 assists in 20 minutes is probably enough for it to matter. But he's old. Somehow he's managed to carve out this long of his career. Glad they've got him for 4 more years. Not really, there's no guarantees on that. But he has been able to, defy some of the expectations and defy some of the trends. Let's take a look if there are any other players that I haven't really covered, because I know there are. The one that I haven't covered off here, who I do need to, is... there's 2 of them. Let's talk about Ben Shepherd, who was a late first-round pick last season and then found his way into the playoff rotation. He also would definitely be voted top 5 in NBA players who look like podcasters. He averaged 4 points a game. He's 23, 6'6", 14 minutes and 13 usage, and none of those numbers should give you any level of excitement whatsoever. But, like I said, with Buddy Hield traded, with Mathurin injured, we actually saw Ben Shepherd play better minutes in the playoffs and look solid. But you do get the feeling that there was a little fairy dust across this whole team, and these weird production situations like with Nembhard and like with Shepherd, and guys out and on the other team and injured, enabled guys to do more that I'm not sure he's going to do. Like, he averaged 5 points in 20 minutes a night, but there's a lot of people, Shepherd looked really great. Like, okay, 5 points in 20 minutes is not anything. He shot 38% on threes, which is good. But it's just like, there's nothing there. And I don't really think we're going to get more. And then we're going to have Mathurin, we're going to have Nembhard, and they drafted Furphy, and you got McConnell re-signed. Like, I don't really know where Shepherd sort of fits into that mix. And speaking of not sure where he fits into the mix, Obi Toppin, they traded 2 second-round picks to the Knicks to get this guy, and they said, here's our starting power forward. It's going to be a great fit with Tyrese Haliburton. And it lasted about 3 weeks before they put a 6'5" shooting guard, Aaron Nesmith, into the starting lineup instead. And then they traded for another power forward, and then they decided, yes, that means that Obi Toppin is worth $20 million a year. And am I getting that number wrong? I just thought just came into my head, that because it sounds so insane that they would pay Obi Toppin $20 million a year after they tried him as a starter and bailed on it and drafted another power forward in that position. It sounds insane that they would do that. I'm looking it up as we speak because maybe I'm just completely wrong on this, and that contract is not that price. No, I am wrong. My bad. Phew. Whoa, okay. That's a relief. It was 4 years. I thought it was 3 years 60. It was 4 years 60. That is still a ridiculous overpay, but it's better. So I'm sure somebody was screaming at the start, George, you're not paid $20 million a year. It was insane. So good. We're there. Toppin is 27. Despite it being only his 5th season, he played 21 minutes with 16 usage and he averaged 10 points. 0.6 steals and 0.5 blocks. What he is, though, is a good percentage guy. 57 from the field and 77 from the line, and that will get the old roto fluffers fluffing, won't it? Because they're good percentages. But he is just not very good. And this is the perfect fit for him. He doesn't really defend. He can score, but not enough. He rebounds, but not enough. He hits some threes, and he hit them at a really high rate last season, Toppin. And I'm pretty certain that when we go in and have a look at the numbers for Obit on the old Yahoo rankings from last season, that'll be one of those ones where it makes him look just so much better than he actually is. I am basically certain that that'll be the case. Actually, let's just pause that and go and have a look. So I think it's going to be embarrassing, to be honest. Oh yeah, there we go. Yahoo said he was the 100th best player last season in 21 minutes, averaging 10 and 4 with half a block. So yeah, be really cautious about making a draft move with Toppin, thinking that like that number has any basis in reality whatsoever, or you need to get you need to make sure you're grabbing him because he is a reserve. And he is someone whose game I don't think is particularly fantasy friendly, but the low turnovers, the fact that he played a lot of games with percentages did make those rankings suggest that he was perhaps definitely better than he actually is. So if we just go through and have a bit of a squiz and go through the ideas of where these guys could be drafted or should be drafted, I've got no problem in a category league with Haliburton at 7 or 8, no worries. In a points league, I don't think I would do that in the first round. It just doesn't make sense for him to be a first round player. Wouldn't be considering it whatsoever. Siakam in the 30s in a points league, no worries. In a category league, outside the 50s, in the 60s probably, because there is just a lot that is missing from his overall game. I don't think we want to take a flyer on Mathurin at the end. McConnell's like a 14-teamer. Nembhard's a later round player. And Miles Turner, it's going to depend. Like he's an 80s in the points league scenario. He's a 50s to 60s category league player. That's probably about it. Just don't get sucked into Toppin. Watch the Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman situation, and stashable situations will lead Jackson to have a little bit more value. And then we see if they do anything, which they won't, with old mate Jarris Walker. Hit the old thumb up and the subscribe on this one. And don't forget to leave those nasty comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.